When we made EVE Online originally in Iceland back in 2000 when we started, then we basically were a team of people that had never made a computer game. So the rules of what makes a computer game, I mean, certainly were known to us to some extent because, I mean, we played computer games, but we took a very different approach because we had never made one before. So we, mainly out of necessity, because we only had 30 people and 3 years to make the game, decided to make more like a sandbox that would revolve around players telling their own stories and defining the world themselves. And that would be the way to create what we sometimes refer to as the infinitely scalable storytelling engine, where the story of the game never runs out. So when people are talking about the shifts now today with the connected world and all that, it feels a bit like a deja vu because this is the only thing we know how to do. We've never really made a sort of a story-driven narrative that then people go and share, like people just share, and that is EVE Online. And then, of course, I mean, the stories of EVE Online have sort of resonated way beyond the game. And I meet so many people that love reading about EVE Online, but not necessarily playing it. So I think we've definitely seen with EVE the power of really sort of giving the power to the players and what can become of that. And that is then what we're harnessing when it comes to Dust 514, which is then connecting into that sort of single shared sandbox to get even more interesting stories with the interplay between the two communities. And certainly scale is going to set in at that point. So everything that we're talking about in terms of sharing videos, sharing experiences, and all that is something that we've been living and breathing for a decade. I would say the biggest lesson is just the more you let go of control, the more you're gonna get back. So it's very scary to think of giving the game to the players. But I mean, that is basically what has made EVE live and thrive and grow for a decade. So if you sort of have the audacity to do that, then you will get it back in spades just through endless amount of inspiration from the players and what they will end up doing with the game. Usually they will do something vastly different than you intended to happen. I remember like a very decisive moment in CCP's history when the first sort of corporation was taken down from the inside after a careful social manipulation of a person that gained the trust of its members, and then after a year stole its coffers and bankrupt the corporation, basically a hostile takeover from the inside. And that was a big moment for us because there was a huge outcry from the community that we should reverse it. And we made the call. I mean, there were no rules broken. I mean, they just betrayed the trust of their fellow players, which is basically what the game is to some extent about. It's about trusting people and building something with them. And the trust is really what makes it exciting and real and all that. So when that happened and we said, well, we won't reverse it because nothing really, no terms of the end user license were violated. And then there were about 500 people which were very unhappy about that, and they left the game as a result of that. But the PR that the event gathered around the world brought maybe 5,000 people into the game, and then later on the 500 people that left, they came back. So that was sort of a decisive moment of saying, okay, this is really players creating something very unexpected out of the game, and embracing that and standing sort of true to that. So the more people can give control and power to the players, the more you will get back as a developer and an operator of a game. So I mean, connected gaming is something that we have been sort of evolving within EVE for a few years, and certainly by bringing Dust into the EVE universe as basically a connected experience with EVE Online, and together they will form something which is like a meta-connected experiences of two games coexisting in the same world. But we've also been adding sort of an API where various members of the community have created various applications on PCs and on mobile phones to sort of help and assist your EVE game playing. And we've been basically taking that sort of connectivity API and that is what we bring to bear to have Eve basically have Dust connect into Eve. So the API is getting very powerful, and we actually introduced it at our fan event earlier this year, that now you can both read and write, and we're creating a system around that. So already the many applications that have been created for iPhone and Android and all that will be able to sort of substantially add to your experience. So that's one component, and that is really important, because the mobile device has become this thing which is the last thing you look at when you go to sleep, and it's the first thing you look at when you wake up in the morning. So that is something where we need to extend the game experience into, because that is really what people want, to the extent of they write their own applications if you don't provide them. I think it's important to provide experiences for those devices which are custom tailored to the strength of the devices. For example, with Dust 514 on the PlayStation 3, rather than to port EVE Online the literal experience over the PlayStation 3, which wouldn't have made any sense at all. The controller, the resolution of the TV and all that wouldn't really have been a good fit for that experience. So we basically made a special experience for the console version of the EVE universe, which is then in the form of Dust 514. And as we think of these connected devices, I think it's important to realize their strengths and weaknesses and make custom tailored experiences that then connect to other experiences, leveraging the strength of the device and navigating around the weaknesses. So as we think about sort of the next step beyond even Dust, what more could we do? Then we're super focused on understanding, okay, what is a really good experience for the device in question, so that we can bring that then onto the platform that the EVE universe has become.